Tonight in Greater Boston, Governor Baker defended his administration's effort to beat back the latest COVID surge before a committee of lawmakers today. But when it comes to mandates, vaccines, masks, and more, some legislators say he can and should be doing more. Two of them, the chairs of the legislature's Joint COVID Committee, join me. And later, Boston School Superintendent Brenda Cassellius on trying to keep kids in classrooms during this record-setting COVID surge, even as hundreds of teachers and staff have called out. With hospital staff and resources stretched thin, schools struggling to stay open, and COVID numbers the highest they've ever been in Massachusetts, lawmakers pressed Governor Baker today on what he and his administration are doing, and more importantly, what they believe he is not doing to keep people safe, pushing for action on more statewide guidelines and mandates.
I can't say to the hospital folks, hey, listen, we're the best and we're better than any other state in the nation, so we should be okay. That does not help them. So I think there is an enormous amount more that we can do. So I'm asking you, can we look at this and can we do something with the sense of urgency that it deserves?
It was the governor's third time testifying about his handling of the pandemic before the legislature's Joint COVID Oversight Committee, testimony that came just a few hours after his announcement that the state has signed a contract to bring 26 million rapid tests into the state over the next 3 months, although he hasn't yet said how he plans to distribute those, except to note schools and childcare will be the top priorities. And he acknowledged in the hearing it's possible that supply chain concerns could mess with that timeline. Baker also highlighted to committee members the state's new digital proof of vaccination website, which launched yesterday, by the way, and lets people download a virtual vaccine card with their information and a QR code showing any COVID vaccines they've gotten in the state. And he noted new guidelines from the state's Department of Health recommending people who've been exposed to COVID get tested 5 days after they were exposed or started showing symptoms. The problem? Just a recommendation, and while the digital proof of vaccination is a welcome development, it's only useful if businesses actually check them. But when committee members asked about mandating things like vaccines or masks to Health and Human Services Secretary Mary Lou Sudders, she had this to say.
We're not inclined to do a mandate.
A response that prompted these closing words from one of the committee's co-chairs.
When we as a state don't take the responsibility that we need to take with regard to mandates, which can be very unpopular, I worry for our local officials.
That co-chair, State Senator Jo Comerford of Northampton, joins me now along with fellow co-chair, State Representative William Driscoll of Milton. Senator, Representative, good to see you again. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Start with you, Senator. Before you share where you think the administration is falling short, could you each pick one major area where you think the Baker administration has gotten it really right on COVID? Senator, starting with you.
Thank you so much. Well, first, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of very targeted, pointed, strategic, tireless work that happened to address COVID-19 head on. And just as you mentioned in your introduction, just before this hearing, there were some very necessary steps, including 26 million rapid tests that are going to come into the Commonwealth, which I think we'd all agree is so much more necessary than the initial bout of those rapid tests that just were insufficient to meet the numbers and demand.
Well, and by the way, he's doing a hell of a lot better at procurement of tests than the President of the United States is doing, I should say, so far. Representative, how about, if I remember correctly from early last year's hearings, you all were quite critical of the governor's vaccination progress. We're one of the handful of most vaccinated states in the country, with the inequities having smoothed out to a serious degree. Has the Baker administration handled that as well as the numbers suggest, or no?
Yeah, to your first question, I think one of the places that the administration's done well is the pivots from the early vaccine rollout, lumpiness and bumpiness. We set a goal early on to get to 4.1 million vaccinated people. We hit that on June 22nd. What we're missing right now is a goal for people getting up to date with their vaccines. We've got a couple million people that are eligible, could get a booster today. Yeah. We've got only 44% of kids 5 to 11 vaccinated right now. I'd love to see us set some goals that practitioners and public alike can work together to meet, so that we get out of this pandemic sooner. And I think today was productive in terms of demonstrating the purpose of the COVID committee. The administration acted on the things you mentioned at the top of the show, just this in the past 48 hours. I was thinking about asking the governor if he wanted to make any more announcements before we got started today. But I think we got answers to several of our questions today. It was important, and it'll help inform our actions of the legislature going forward.
Well, I don't know this to be a fact, but I would guess that the scheduling of your hearing didn't do anything but help speed those announcements. Representative, staying with you, I think viewers know this and my radio show are mandate central, so I should be fully transparent. We believe in mandates in crises like this. I'm assuming you both believe, am I right, that there should be a mask mandate statewide? Is that, you're nodding, so I assume the answer is yes? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, then Representative, when that issue was broached with Secretary Sutters and/or the governor today, what explanation is there for not doing what almost every single public health official I've heard suggests is the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think that coordinated collective actions like a statewide mandate, like a statewide goal for vaccinations for adults and kids, I think those are important actions. And when they're done collectively in a coordinated fashion, we know that we can get things done. I think the secretary was also correct, though. A mask mandate alone will not end a surge. It can prevent a surge. It can slow transmission. But we need to do, again, coordinated approaches. That's how we either prevent us from getting this to this point or help us get out of them.
Well, why shouldn't there be, Representative, why shouldn't there be a vaccination mandate statewide, not unlike the one that exists in Boston as of Saturday? You want to go into a performance venue, you want to go to a gym, you want to go to a restaurant, you're vaccinated or else you don't go.
I think it's a completely fair question and one that I talk to my colleagues about often. People from around the state are in different places on this. And I think as we continue to see the efficacy and the safety of the vaccines proven with each shot given, as they are shown to be proven safe, I think we'll get there someday. It's not going to happen tomorrow like I'd like to see, but there's a lot of good data out there and it continues to get better. And if you look at right now, folks if you're fully up to date with your vaccinations, your likelihood of ending up in the hospital or severe illness is cut dramatically down.
One of the arguments, Senator, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if this was voiced today by the administration, that you hear opposed to mask mandates is, well, the key issue is get vaccinated. But I think I have the numbers right. In this state, in the last week, the number of breakthrough infections was more than, I think it was 13 or 14,000 on average a day. There were 112 deaths, I think, in the past week from breakthrough infections. Again, for those who don't know the term, fully vaccinated people. Doesn't that sort of undercut the argument that it's all about vaccinations and mask mandates just aren't that important?
It absolutely undercuts it. We of course have to lean as a state, with public health officials to the messaging and the belief in the efficacy, as the chair said, of vaccinations. But we can't for a moment think that all we have to deploy is a vaccine mandate or a vaccine rollout in order to get the kind of efficacy in terms of meeting this Omicron pandemic head on. We must have a vaccine plus mandate, and that would include, I think, universal mask mandate for targeted indoor spaces and a targeted vaccine mandate for some larger venues like nightclubs and stadiums and theaters, things like that.
I want to return to the mandates in 1 second, but quickly, if I can, starting with you, Senator. Emergency rooms bursting at the seams in lots of places in the state. Small businesses, including lots of ones I patronize in my hometown of Cambridge, hanging by a thread of that. Is the administration doing enough? Is the legislature doing enough on both of those fronts, Senator, to keep emergency rooms safe, to keep the staff from going out of their minds, and to keep small business owners afloat?
So two very different things. I think they certainly talk to each other. With regard to emergency rooms, no, we're not doing enough as a state. We need to slow the wave of Omicron. We need to stem that spike and shorten the curve. We need to do that because even though, as the governor said repeatedly during today's hearing that Omicron doesn't make us sick unless you're unvaccinated, totally understand. It does break through, as you're saying, and it has caused people to enter the hospital who aren't, who wouldn't imagine to be at risk if they were fully vaccinated. There are these cases, and they are tipping the scales, and our hospitals are depleted, they're understaffed, and workers are exhausted. And so we have to do our best to meet this pandemic head on right now.
How about small businesses quickly? Is there more help coming from the state?
I do think there should be more help coming from the state. Certainly, the legislature has joined together House and Senate for small businesses. I think we can do more and should do more. I also think that uniform state guidance will be of huge help to local communities, because otherwise they're going to have a mask mandate in one community and not a mask mandate in another, and that could disproportionately burden a small business.
Representative Driscoll, I may have said this to you last time we were here, and this is the one thing I just don't get. If you in the legislature are unhappy with the fact that the governor, for example, won't do a mask mandate, if you're unhappy that the governor won't do a targeted, as the senator said, vaccine mandate, why don't you do it? It's an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature. If the governor didn't like it, you could override his veto. Why don't you do a mask mandate tomorrow? Why don't you do a targeted vaccine mandate tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. This question comes up a lot. And, really the way that we look at it is the legislature is a deliberative body. We're involved in the recovery process and figuring out the policy and where the rescue plan money goes, as we've done with $200 million that we gave to the administration back in June of 21 for this very day, for if there was a variant surge or other public health crisis related to COVID-19. The executive branch is really the day-to-day operations manager for the Commonwealth. They're in a position they can make quick decisions and act with the departments to put those things in place. And so we're looking at, again, your question about small business, a question about hospitals in the long term, how we're going to come out of this, because I'm really concerned about the damage that's being done to the hospital workforce, the healthcare workforce, and industries like that.
I only have a minute left. I'm sorry. Respectfully, I understand what you believe the role of the governor to be, but if you don't believe the governor is doing that which you believe is necessary, isn't it incumbent on the legislature to fill the hole? And I only have 30 seconds, Representative.
I think today is a great example of what the point of the committee is, to have public accountability, which is important, to talk through these questions and answers with the governor and his team. And we'll continue to do that. It's really incumbent upon them managing the Department of Health to make those statewide decisions. And we'll continue to support local municipalities, regardless of what the decisions end up being.
Well, if they don't do it, he doesn't do them, I hope you do. Senator and Representative, I'm glad you're holding hearings, and I'm really glad you made time for us tonight. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Appreciate you.
Several school districts across Massachusetts were closed today, Boston, Springfield, and Worcester among them, citing the cold. But of course, the COVID factors likely loom large in those decisions as well, with more than 1,000 teachers and staff out this week in Boston alone. The disagreement of how best to navigate schooling as we approach the third year of the pandemic has played out in public view recently here, with Boston Mayor Michelle Wu saying that although in-person learning is best, the city might, on a case-by-case basis, use a tool that Governor Baker has strongly pushed against: remote learning.
Whether or not we get credit from the state for a day of remote learning, if a school needs to, and a school-by-school basis needs to do that because of staffing issues, we are going to take that if that's the safest way to administer learning that day. It just means that we would have to make up days at the end of the year.
We've said all along that we think the best place for kids is in school. We're going to continue to do whatever we can to help them deliver on that agenda, but that's certainly where we want to be.
But is it enough? Joining me on that and the too many to list challenges school administrators are facing in this latest surge is Boston Public School Superintendent Brenda Cassellius. Superintendent, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Good to see you as well, Jim.
So low vaccination rates among particularly younger students, staff shortages, high numbers of infections among students. Is it realistic to think you can avoid going remote at some point?
Well, we're avoiding that at every cost, and it's been an all hands on deck. I've been so appreciative of Mayor Wu and her ability to see and assess on the ground with me. We've been partnering on this and looking at all of our numbers. We're looking at operational challenges that we have, staffing challenges, and also the health reality on the ground in our schools. And so those three measures are what we're looking at every single day with our school leaders and our school superintendents as we assess school by school, classroom by classroom, and even the district if we have to. You know, we closed on Friday and closed today because of operational challenges due to weather. And so we'll continue to make those calls as needed.
Do you think the governor's being too rigid in his position to say no credit towards the 180-day school mandate if you end up going remote? Does he understand, in your estimation, how difficult it is for you and the people who work for you it is to do this in this environment?
Well, the difficulty isn't just here, you know, it is here in Boston, it's across the nation. You see it on the news every night. You know, good to see them talking about our schools, but not for this, right? So I think that he, you know, is good to keep the pressure on for us to be in person, but I do believe that we should have some flexibility. In 2020, they gave us 10 days of flexibility. They lowered the school year to 170 days. I think he could build a lot of goodwill with school superintendents if you gave us a little bit more flexibility.
If you have to go remote, are you prepared? Is the infrastructure there? Here's what I asked that question of the mayor when she was here. I think it was a week ago today. Here's Mayor Wu on that topic.
As a district, we would have a significant amount of work to do, right? We've been through this over previous school years, but between the devices, the family engagement, there's a lot of work in changing over.
A lot of work in changing over. Is the work ready? Would you be ready if you had the need?
Easy, right? But we did it in 2020, so we know what we're doing and we know how to get it done. You know, our students have devices. We have Wi-Fi now. Those are things we didn't have in 2020. We know how to stand up super sites for food so that our children can get food in their tummies. And we've been working with the mayor and with the city to be prepared in case we do have to pivot to remote. So we are prepared either on a school level or on a district level. I think we'd need probably 24-hour, 48-hour notice to really put it in gear if we really needed to do it. And that's why we're watching the numbers 3 times a day to make sure that we have a good pulse on our staffing. We meet in the mornings, we meet in mid-afternoon, and we meet in the evenings.
You know, one of the things, I know you are focused a lot on inequities in the school system. I hope everybody watching cares about these kinds of issues. There was a really troubling piece on GBH News here by Meg Woolhouse talking about one particular inequity, comparing Needham schools and the Boston schools. Talking about Needham, if you need to quarantine or isolate or you're sick, you just make a phone call and you can live stream your class. In Boston, they describe a procedure where you got to be sick at least 2 weeks, and respectfully, you have to go through hoops. I think there's a 6-point procedure to be able to do this kind of thing. Why can the kids in the wealthier district of Needham live stream a class if they're out 1 day, and the kids in Boston have to be out 2 weeks and satisfy all these criteria to be able to do the same thing?
Well, we have fantastic relationships with our teachers. We do have the same availability. We have cameras in every single classroom, so our teachers can live stream if they choose to. We have an agreement with our teachers right now that they won't do hybrid learning, but that they will upload materials for students for continuity of learning. And we also have a wonderful new product that we're using called Paper, which is online 24/7 tutoring in multiple languages for our students, so that if they do have to quarantine or isolate, they can use the paper, or they can get instruction from their teachers on how they can access the tutoring and access their daily lessons.
But I am right, or that report is right, that they cannot, unless they're out at least 2 weeks in Boston, live stream that class that they're missing. Is that not correct?
Well, you know, our teachers are uploading materials and working with students as if they would any other absence that they have. We do have the technology in our schools for them to be able to live stream if they'd like to, but our agreement right now with our teachers union is that they are not doing hybrid learning. They are uploading lessons and continuing the students' instruction.
Isn't that shortchanging the kid?
Well, I think that we are using the way that we are able to get our students the lessons that they have with their students every day. We have the technology, and some teachers are using it, and others have chosen not to at this point.
There was a lot of stories about you returning to a classroom, I think for the first time in 20 years, and you seem pretty happy about it. There's a great little bite, I'm going to play it here, of a kid at the school where you subbed, I guess when he heard you were coming. This is from WCVB. Here it is.
That it was someone a little bit famous.
Somebody famous coming. My apologies, it was a little girl. I didn't realize it was a little girl, not a boy. Was it like riding a bicycle? I mean, you seemed overjoyed, and I assume it was real. Was it like riding a bike, or was it difficult to get back into it?
Well, let me just say, Ms. Whitmer, the principal, set me up great with Mr. Holden's class. And Mr. Holden had the best sub plans minute by minute for what I needed to do that day. And there were a couple of partner teachers who came in and supported me with some of our special students. And, it was just an incredibly joyful day. The students were incredibly insightful and just eager to learn. They had a full day of instruction. And it has still fueled me through these last several days. And it was the best day I've had in over 2 years.
That's really great to hear. Speaking of best day, this morning I'm listening to National Public Radio coming into work, and there was this shocking story that may not surprise you. The head of the National School Superintendents Association is talking, and I almost can't believe this, about some superintendents with whom he has been speaking, who are so stressed by what's going on that they literally talk to him about taking their own lives. We talk a lot about the stress on students. We talk a lot about the stress on teachers. I haven't talked much at all about the stress on people like you. How intense is it?
It is pretty intense, and it is very challenging, particularly in other parts of the state, of the United States, where school superintendents, school committee members, school board members have been threatened.
Yeah.
There's just been this vitriol and just nastiness that has happened among adults. And I just really am so blessed here to have such a supportive school committee, such a supported city, where we haven't had all of these huge debates. Now, certainly, not everyone's agreed with all the decisions that I've made or question our policy around the mitigation efforts that we've done. But we haven't had the rancor and the vitriol in other cities that I think have plagued some of my other superintendents. But the day-to-day grind, the 12-hour days, ongoing, lack of vacation for many of us, it has been really, really challenging for our superintendents and for our school principals as well. They're carrying a huge burden and brunt of this, and it's just been challenging on everybody from every single aspect. As I talk with my colleagues, many of them are choosing to leave.
Well, I hope for your sake and all of ours that the tension and stress that you and people like you are under ends soon. Superintendent, it's good to see you as always. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
That's it for tonight. I hope you'll come back tomorrow. I'll talk to the first ever Cambodian American mayor in the country, Sokari Chow of Lowell. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned next for another installment from the GBH News Curiosity Desk.
Hey folks, Edgar B. Herwick III here from GBH's Curiosity Desk, where you ask questions and I find answers. Today we are at the Mass Autobahn Blue Hills Reservation. Why, you may ask? Well, we're going to answer this question from John Goldthwait.
I have a question for you about birds, and do they have a sense of smell?
For answers, we turn to Mass Audubon veteran Norman Smith.
Very interesting question. And if you asked this question 25 or 30 years ago, we would probably say, no, birds probably don't have any kind of a sense of smell at all, and that's what the thought was.
But we have come a long way since the early 1990s. We now know that Pluto is not a planet. We know that Apple stock was a much better investment than Beanie Babies. And we know that, yes, most birds, in fact, probably all birds, have a sense of smell.
Why did we think that birds didn't have a sense of smell? They don't seem to have much of an olfactory gland in their brain, and their nasal passages, for the most part, are very small in most bird species.
But birds, of course, come in all shapes and sizes, and it turns out the same is true of those nasal passages.
This is the skull of a turkey vulture, and if you look at that turkey vulture, you can see the nasal passages right here, and you can see how large those are. Why don't you hold on to that? This is a barred owl skull. And look at these nasal passages compared to the size of the vulture.
Yep.
Very tiny.
Researchers also learned that just like those nasal passages, the olfactory bulb in a bird's brain isn't always so small. And the same goes for the number of smell-related genes each bird species has. Kiwis, for example, have about 200 more of them than humans do. So how well a bird can smell really depends on the bird, and some can smell pretty darn well. As for how our fine feathered friends actually use their sense of smell, that ranges too. Studies on little ground foragers called juncos have shown that they use it to mate. Homing pigeons use it to help them navigate. And for petrels and a lot of vultures, it's how they find food. And speaking of vultures, you might have guessed from those huge nasal cavities that they are indeed among the very best smellers in the entire bird kingdom. So good, in fact, that they get put to work, so to speak, up in America's 49th state.
So when I was in Alaska, what was really interesting is the guys were talking about when we have a leak in the natural gas pipeline, we look and see if there are any vultures circling around the pipeline, because the vultures pick up that odor that they put in the natural gas, and it smells very much, that methane smells like dead animals.
Now, still other birds, even some really common ones like hummingbirds, remain shrouded in mystery.
The hummingbirds actually use a sense of smell when they're migrating, or do they use it to find flowers? I mean, flowers give off an aroma. Maybe hummingbirds can have some sort of a sense of smell and pick up the aroma from a flower to key in on where those flowers are. We really don't know.
In fact, what we still do not know about birds and their sense of smell likely far exceeds what we actually do know. And that is just fine with Norman Smith.
And that's the exciting thing about research, because we find new things all the time. And you don't have to be a scientist to do research.
We could not agree more, Norman. Finding new things is what we are all about, and we cannot do that without you. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and perhaps most importantly, let me know what you are curious about, because hey, I might just look into it for you. I'm Edgar B. Harwick III. Stay curious out there.
The Curiosity Desk is sponsored by Emerson College, inspiring curiosity and creative expression in all of us.